History remembers the grand movements of armies, the declarations of leaders, and the geopolitical consequences of conflict. But in the spaces between these sweeping narratives exist the personal stories that reveal war's true nature. Today, we uncover one such story, that of Lieutenant Charles Morgan, a young man whose journey led him from the sage-covered hills of Reno, Nevada, to the blood-soaked forests of Belleau Wood in the summer of 1918. Before the uniform, before the trenches, before war claimed him for its relentless machinery, Charles Morgan was simply Charlie to those who knew him best. Born in 1895 to a rancher and a schoolteacher, Charlie grew up under Nevada's vast skies where the horizon seemed to promise endless possibilities. His father, James Morgan, had come west during the silver boom, arriving too late for fortune but finding something more valuable, a place to put down roots and raise a family away from the crowded eastern cities. Charlie's childhood was marked by the contradictions of early 20th century America, a nation simultaneously embracing modernity while clinging to frontier traditions. In Reno, the arrival of the automobile coincided with cattle drives still passing through town. Young Charlie would watch these mechanical marvels with fascination while also spending summers helping with the ranch's livestock, equally comfortable with new technology and ancient skills. It was during his first day at Reno Elementary in 1901 that 6-year-old Charlie met Walter Hayes, a quiet boy with a quick mind and quicker hands. Their friendship began, as many do at that age, over something trivial, a shared appreciation for the intricate pocket watch Walter's father had given him. By lunchtime, they were inseparable. By week's end, they had formed a bond that would endure for the remainder of Charlie's too short life. The Morgan and Hayes families soon recognized the depth of the boys' friendship, accommodating it with good-natured acceptance. Weekends found Walter at the Morgan Ranch or Charlie at the Hayes modest home in town, where Walter's father worked as a printer for the local newspaper. Together they built elaborate forts in the foothills, fished the Truckee River, and dreamed the boundless dreams of youth. As they grew older, their friendship matured but never diminished. They shared their first cigarettes and subsequent nausea, their first heartbreaks, their evolving ambitions. Charlie developed an interest in engineering, marveling at the construction of the Truckee River Dam and spending hours sketching designs for bridges and buildings. Walter, influenced by his father, developed a writer's sensibility, chronicling their adventures in carefully kept journals and eventually writing for the high school newspaper. Their plans seemed set. Charlie would study engineering at the University of Nevada, while Walter pursued journalism. They even discussed starting a company together someday, combining Charlie's technical skills with Walter's communication abilities. The future stretched before them, untroubled by thoughts of the gathering storm across the Atlantic. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914 barely registered in their consciousness. Europe's problems seemed distant and irrelevant to two young men in Nevada. Even as war engulfed the continent, America maintained its official neutrality. Charlie and Walter graduated high school in 1913 and began their respective studies, occasionally discussing the conflict overseas, but never imagining it would touch their lives directly. By 1917, however, the reality of war could no longer be ignored. Germany's resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare, the Zimmermann telegram, and President Wilson's call for a war to end all wars transformed America's isolationism into reluctant intervention. When Congress declared war on Germany in April 1917, patriotic fervor swept the nation, reaching even the remote corners of Nevada. Charlie, now 22 and in his final year of engineering studies, felt the pull of duty immediately. Walter, though equally patriotic, suffered from asthma that made military service impossible. a circumstance that would fill him with guilty relief and profound regret for the remainder of his life. Their last evening together in Reno was spent on the banks of the Truckee River, skipping stones as they had as children, speaking little but understanding much. "I'll be back before you publish your first novel," Charlie had said, with forced lightness. "I'll have a draft waiting for your editorial comments," Walter replied, his voice steady despite the fear gripping his heart. On a warm morning in May 1917, Charlie boarded a train bound for Camp Lewis in Washington State, where the newly formed 91st Division was conducting basic training. Walter stood on the platform until the train disappeared from sight, then walked to the newspaper office where he had recently secured a position as a junior reporter. The editor, recognizing Walter's distress, assigned him to cover the local war effort, bond drives, recruitment initiatives, aid societies. This work would become Walter's way of contributing, of maintaining connection to a friend being carried ever further from home. Charlie's letters arrived regularly during training. His engineering background and natural leadership qualities earned him a commission as a second lieutenant. His correspondence revealed a thoughtful young man grappling with his new responsibilities, concerned less for his own safety than for the welfare of the men who would soon be under his command. He described the transformation from civilians to soldiers with a mixture of pride and melancholy, noting how quickly young men from all walks of life adapted to military discipline and purpose. By March 1918, Lieutenant Charles Morgan was crossing the Atlantic aboard the USS Leviathan, a German ocean liner converted to troop transport. His final letter from American soil asked Walter to look in on his parents occasionally and to send newspapers from home. "Even the advertisements," he wrote, "especially the advertisements. I want to remember what normal life looks like." The American Expeditionary Forces arrived in France at a critical moment. The German spring offensive had pushed Allied forces back significantly, threatening Paris and potentially changing the war's outcome. Fresh American troops were immediately valuable, though their combat inexperience concerned Allied commanders. The 2nd Division, including the Marine Brigade, to which Lieutenant Morgan had been attached as a liaison officer, underwent additional training near Bourmont before being thrown into the crucible of combat. On May 31, 1918, they received urgent orders to move toward Château-Thierry, where German forces threatened to break through to Paris. The Americans were tasked with filling a gap in the French line near a forested hunting preserve known as Belleau Wood. What followed would become one of the defining battles of American involvement in World War I, a 3-week struggle of unprecedented intensity and brutality. Lieutenant Morgan led his platoon into Belleau Wood on June 6, 1918, part of the Marine assault ordered by General James Harbord. The Americans faced entrenched German forces with superior positions and interlocking fields of machine gun fire. The wheat fields approaching the wood offered no cover, forcing the Marines and soldiers to advance across open ground under devastating fire. Still, they pressed forward with what French observers described as remarkable determination. The battle became a nightmarish sequence of frontal assaults, close quarters combat, and desperate struggles for tiny parcels of bullet-scarred forest. The Americans gained ground during the day, only to be driven back by counterattacks at night. Artillery transformed ancient trees into deadly splinters. Poison gas lingered in low areas, requiring constant vigilance. Water became scarce. Wounded men went unrecovered for days, and the summer heat intensified the horror of death surrounding the combatants. Throughout this ordeal, Lieutenant Morgan maintained a pocket journal, documenting both military observations and private thoughts. Marine Corps records indicate he led several successful assaults on German positions, demonstrating a tactical intelligence that saved many lives. Fellow officers later recounted his calm under fire and his habit of carrying extra water for his men, denying himself to ensure their needs were met. On June 14th, during an attack on a heavily defended section of the wood, Lieutenant Morgan's platoon encountered intense machine gun fire from a concealed position. Witnesses reported that he was organizing a flanking maneuver when a German artillery shell exploded nearby. He was mortally wounded but remained conscious long enough to complete his orders and ensure his second-in-command understood the plan. He died while being evacuated to a field hospital, his last words reportedly being a request that someone write to his family and his friend Walter. Among his personal effects carefully preserved and eventually returned to his parents was a blood-stained letter, nearly complete but unsent, addressed to Walter Hayes. This letter, later donated by Walter to the Nevada Historical Society, provides an intimate glimpse into not only the horrors of Belleau Wood, but the enduring power of friendship in humanity's darkest hours. What follows are the words of Lieutenant Charles Morgan in his final letter to his childhood friend, words written with mud-stained hands, in brief moments of respite during one of the Great War's most terrible battles.
June 13th, 1918, somewhere in Belleau Wood, France. Dear Walt, the censors will likely black out any specific information about our location, so I'll simply say I'm writing from beneath the branches of what once must have been a beautiful forest. The trees here are old, or were, before artillery transformed many of them into splinters and stumps. I find myself wondering who walked these paths in peacetime. Hunters, lovers, children gathering mushrooms or playing hide and seek. Now the only hiding is deadly earnest, and what we seek is merely to survive until tomorrow. I received your April letter just yesterday, mail delivery being somewhat unreliable in our current circumstances. You asked how I was really doing and said you could read between the lines of my sanitized accounts. You always could see through my attempts at deception, even when we were kids, and I insisted I hadn't been the one to break Mrs. Harrington's window with that wild baseball throw. Some things never change, even when everything else has. The truth, Walter, I'm exhausted beyond any tiredness I've ever known, not just physical fatigue, though there's plenty of that, but a weariness that seems to have seeped into my bones. We've been fighting for this same patch of forest for over a week now. Men have died for gains measured in yards. Yesterday, we captured a German machine gun position that had been holding us up for days. The triumph lasted approximately 4 hours before artillery forced us to withdraw. This morning we took it again. Tomorrow, who knows? I think about Reno constantly. Not just the place, but the feeling of it. The dry air that smelled of sage after rain. The mountains standing watch on the horizon. The weight of summer heat against my skin. Mostly, I think about our spot by the river, where we'd skip stones and solve all the world's problems over pilfered cigarettes. What I wouldn't give to be sitting there now, listening to you explain why Ernest Thompson Seton is a superior writer to Jack London, or why Edith Crawford wouldn't give you the time of day, though I still maintain you never actually spoke to her. War is nothing like we imagined from those adventure novels we devoured. Remember how we'd act out scenes from The Red Badge of Courage in your backyard? We had no idea. How could we? There's no glory here, Walt. None whatsoever. Just frightened young men trying to stay alive. Following orders they hope makes sense in some larger strategy they cannot see. The romance of battle exists only in books written by those who never experienced it. Don't misunderstand. I believe in why we're fighting. The German advance had to be stopped, but belief doesn't make the reality any less terrible. Last night I held a boy from Kansas as he died, barely 18, crying for his mother. What do you say to someone in that moment? I told him he was going home, that his mother was waiting. It seemed kinder than the truth. After he was gone, I used my flashlight to look at the photo he'd been clutching. A smiling woman standing before a farmhouse with a windmill in the background. I wonder if she knows yet. I wonder how many mothers receive telegrams today. Your newspaper articles have been making the rounds among the Nevada boys in my company. Your piece about Mr. Fitzgerald converting his auto shop to make parts for Liberty trucks, particularly lifted spirits. It made home feel real again, not just a fading dream. You found your calling, Walt. I knew you would. You see things others miss and find the humanity in every story. Hold on to that. It matters more than you know. I had a strange experience 3 days ago. During a lull in the fighting, I found myself alone at the edge of a small clearing. The morning mist was rising from the ground, and suddenly, through some trick of light and fog, I could have sworn I was looking at Pyramid Lake at dawn. You remember that camping trip the summer before high school, when your father let us take the ford and we got stuck in the sand? For just a moment, I was there again, and you were complaining about the mosquitoes while I tried to dig the wheels out. The illusion lasted perhaps 10 seconds before a shell explosion somewhere to our west shattered it. But in those seconds, Walt, I was completely at peace. These moments of unexpected beauty ambush me regularly. A sunset turning shell-hole puddles into pools of gold. Wildflowers somehow blooming amidst devastation. Birds that continue to sing despite the chaos we've brought to their home. I collect these moments carefully, tucking them away like rare coins. They help me remember that the world contains more than this madness, that somewhere life continues normally. I've been meaning to tell you something, but it seemed too solemn for previous letters. If I don't make it back, a possibility I must acknowledge, though I have every intention of seeing Nevada again. I want you to know that your friendship has been the greatest treasure of my life. More than any accomplishment or ambition, I value the bond we've shared since that first day of school. You know me better than anyone, have seen me at my best and worst, and somehow decided I was worth keeping around anyway. Remember when I fell through the ice on the Truckee that winter when we were 14? How you formed a human chain with Ben Cooper and managed to pull me out. I was so busy being embarrassed about my carelessness that I don't think I ever properly thanked you. You saved my life that day, Walt. But more importantly, you've made my life worth living through all the days before and since. Some men never experience the kind of brotherhood we've shared. I've been luckier than most. The sergeant is signaling that we move out in 5 minutes. We're attempting to take and hold the northern section of the wood tonight. The intelligence officers believe the German forces are weakening. Their supplies stretch thin. I hope they're right. I'm ready for this particular chapter to end. I had a dream last night about that road trip we planned, the one where we would follow the Lincoln Highway all the way to New York City. We'll still do it when I get back. I want to see the country we're fighting for, every mile of it, with my best friend riding shotgun. We'll bring a camera and you can write about our adventures. Who knows? Maybe it'll make a decent book. Take care of yourself, Walt. Keep writing, not just articles, but that novel you've been talking about since we were 16. The world needs your voice, your particular way of seeing things. And if you could, check on my parents occasionally. My mother puts on a brave face in her letters, but I know she worries constantly. Tell her I'm being careful, even if that's not entirely true. It's nearly dark now, and I should finish this before we move out. Strange to think these words will cross an ocean while I remain here among these shattered trees. But perhaps they carry something of me with them, not just thoughts but essence. Perhaps in reading them, you'll feel my presence as strongly as I feel yours, even with an ocean and a continent between us. One last thing. Do you remember our pact from graduation night? How we sat on your roof watching shooting stars and promised we'd live lives worth writing about? I've been thinking about that lately. Perhaps a life isn't measured in achievements or accolades or even years. Perhaps it's measured in connections, in moments of perfect understanding, in the invisible threads that bind us to others. By that accounting, I've lived richly indeed, largely thanks to you. They're calling for me now. Dawn comes early. and with it duties I cannot postpone. Whatever happens in the days ahead, know that you've been the best of friends, and that somewhere in France a Nevada boy carries the desert in his heart and your friendship in his soul. Until we meet again, either by the Truckee or beyond the stars, Charlie. P.S. I found a 4-leaf clover yesterday, pressed it between pages of my pocket Bible. Seems the luck of the Irish extends to these French woods. I'm keeping it as a talisman, though I've never been superstitious. Perhaps I'm becoming so. War makes believers of many kinds.
Lieutenant Charles Morgan never had the opportunity to send his final letter. It was recovered from his pocket after he fell at Belleau Wood, eventually making its way home to Reno, along with his other personal effects. Walter Hayes received it on a crisp autumn day in 1918, just weeks before the armistice that would end the war, but far too late for the young man who had written it with such hope of return. Walter kept his promise to look after the Morgan family. Historical records show he visited them weekly, often bringing newspapers and small gifts. When interviewed for this documentary, Morgan family descendants shared that Walter eventually married in 1924, but maintained his close relationship with Charlie's parents until their passing in the early 1930s. He never missed placing flowers on his friend's memorial marker on the anniversary of his death, though the body of Lieutenant Charles Morgan remains in the Aisne-Marne American Cemetery in France, one of 2,289 American service members laid to rest there. The promised road trip along the Lincoln Highway never materialized, yet Walter completed it alone in 1928, documenting the journey in a series of articles for the Reno Evening Gazette titled Eastward with Ghosts. The pieces earned him national recognition and launched a distinguished career in journalism. His novel, Brothers Beyond Blood, loosely based on his friendship with Charlie, was published in 1935 to critical acclaim. The dedication read simply, "For C.M., who taught me the meaning of loyalty." The Battle of Belleau Wood eventually ended on June 26, 1918, with an American victory that came at tremendous cost. Of the approximately 10,000 American casualties, 1,811 were killed. The 4th Marine Brigade suffered the highest casualty rate of any brigade in American military history to that point. Yet the battle's strategic and symbolic importance cannot be overstated. It marked the first significant American engagement of the war, demonstrating both the courage of American forces and their willingness to pay the ultimate price in the Allied cause. For the first time, European powers recognized the United States as a formidable military presence, not merely an economic powerhouse. The German assessment of American troops shifted dramatically after Belleau Wood, with intelligence reports acknowledging their tenacity and fighting spirit. The French government later renamed the forest Bois de la Brigade de Marine in honor of the U.S. Marines' sacrifice and decorated many American participants, including Lieutenant Morgan, who was posthumously awarded the Croix de Guerre. These historical facts, while significant, tell us little about the human experience of those who fought there. For that dimension, we rely on letters like Charlie's, intimate windows into individual souls caught in history's machinery. His words reveal not just the horrors of trench warfare, but the universal human need for connection, memory, and meaning in the face of chaos and mortality. What wisdom might we glean from Lieutenant Morgan's final communication? What lessons does his interrupted life offer those of us fortunate enough to live in less catastrophic times? Perhaps the first is about the nature of friendship itself. The bond between Charlie and Walter transcended distance, circumstance, even death. It was neither diminished by separation nor contingent on constant contact, qualities particularly worth remembering in our age of instant communication and social media connections. Their friendship was built on shared experiences, mutual understanding, and unwavering loyalty. "You know me better than anyone," Charlie wrote, "have seen me at my best and worst, and somehow decided I was worth keeping around anyway." In this simple statement lies the essence of true friendship, not perfection or advantage, but acceptance and constancy. There is also, in Charlie's letter, a profound appreciation for what we might call ordinary magic, those mundane moments whose value becomes apparent only in their absence. The dry air that smelled of sage after rain, conversations by the river, even arguments about literature. These unremarkable experiences formed the tapestry of a life he treasured. How often do we overlook similar gifts in our own lives, distracted by ambition or discontent until loss renders them precious? Lieutenant Morgan's observations about war itself remain disturbingly relevant. "There's no glory here," he wrote, "none whatsoever. Just frightened young men trying to stay alive, following orders they hope make sense in some larger strategy they cannot see." More than a century after these words were written, as conflicts continue to erupt across our troubled world, his first-hand testimony stands as a necessary corrective to romanticized notions of combat. Those who have experienced war's reality rarely glorify it, a truth worth remembering when weighing the terrible decision to send young people into harm's way. The letter also speaks to how humans seek meaning amid suffering. Note how Charlie collects moments of beauty like rare coins, wildflowers among devastation, birds singing despite chaos, sunlight transforming shell-hole puddles into pools of gold. This isn't mere escapism, but a profound act of spiritual resistance, an insistence that beauty and meaning persist even in humanity's darkest hours. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist who survived Nazi concentration camps, would later develop an entire therapeutic approach based on this capacity to find meaning in suffering. Charlie intuited this truth in the blood-soaked forest of Belleau Wood. Perhaps most striking is Lieutenant Morgan's reflection on what constitutes a life well lived. Perhaps a life isn't measured in achievements or accolades or even years, he wrote. Perhaps it's measured in connections, in moments of perfect understanding, in the invisible threads that bind us to others. These words, written by a young man facing his own mortality, challenge our culture's emphasis on longevity, accomplishment, and material success. They suggest instead that the quality of our connections, the depth of our presence, and the integrity of our actions matter more than any external metric of achievement. By this measure, Lieutenant Charles Morgan's brief 23 years contained abundant richness. His friendship with Walter, his service to country, his compassion for the dying Kansas boy, his appreciation for beauty amid horror. These reveal a life of depth and meaning, regardless of its brevity. There is comfort in this perspective for anyone who has lost a loved one too soon, a reminder that significance is not necessarily correlated with duration. Walter Hayes understood this truth. Though he lived to the age of 86, dying peacefully in 1983, he maintained throughout his life that Charlie had been the better man, not because of any particular achievement, but because of his capacity for friendship, courage, and finding wonder in the everyday. In his memoirs, Walter wrote, "Some flames burn briefly but with unmatched brightness." Charlie was such a light. Those of us who live longer aren't necessarily blessed with greater lives, just more time to understand what we've witnessed in others. The correspondence between these two friends, dozens of letters preserved by the Hayes family and eventually donated to the Nevada Historical Society, offers a remarkable chronicle of early 20th century America. From boyhood adventures to university aspirations to the trenches of France, their words document not just two individual lives, but the transformation of a nation and a world. Historians value such collections precisely because they humanize grand historical narratives, reminding us that history is ultimately the aggregate of countless personal stories. Yet beyond its historical significance, Lieutenant Morgan's final letter speaks to something timeless about the human condition. Our need for connection, our search for meaning, our capacity to find beauty even in darkness. A century has passed since Charlie wrote to Walter from beneath those shattered trees in Belleau Wood. The world has changed profoundly. Technologies unimaginable in 1918, social transformations beyond the horizon of possibility then, conflicts and challenges unknown to that generation. Yet the fundamental human experiences Charlie described remain startlingly familiar. The Great War, optimistically called the war to end all wars, proved instead to be merely the first global conflict of a violent century. Lieutenant Morgan's generation, those who survived, would live to see their own children fight in an even more destructive world war just 2 decades later. Yet even knowing this tragic failure to secure lasting peace, we can still value their sacrifice, their courage, their determination to create a better world than the one they inherited. Walter Hayes certainly did. His journalism career focused largely on international cooperation and the prevention of future conflicts. He became an early advocate for the United Nations and reported extensively on the development of international law. In 1955, he established the Charles Morgan Scholarship at the University of Nevada, supporting students committed to diplomacy and conflict resolution. The scholarship continues today, having funded the education of over 300 students, many of whom have gone on to distinguished careers in diplomatic service. In this way, the interrupted life of Lieutenant Charles Morgan continues to influence our world. His friendship with Walter, preserved and transformed by tragedy, generated ripples that extend far beyond their brief time together in Reno. The invisible threads Charlie wrote about, those connections that give life its meaning, did not break with his death but strengthened, expanded, multiplied. As we conclude this journey through one friendship's remarkable story, we might consider the threads connecting our own lives to others, some visible and acknowledged, others perhaps unrecognized until circumstances reveal their strength and significance. We might reflect on Walter's lifelong loyalty to his fallen friend, how grief transformed into purpose, memory into action. We might consider our own capacity to forge connections that transcend the limitations of time, distance, even mortality itself. Lieutenant Charles Morgan's final letter, written in a shattered French forest over a century ago, offers us a perspective both sobering and hopeful. Life is fragile, unpredictable, sometimes brutally short. Yet within these constraints, we possess remarkable freedom to determine what matters, to collect moments of beauty, to cherish connections, to find meaning even in hardship. As Charlie wrote to Walter, "By that accounting I've lived richly indeed." Perhaps in the end there is no higher aspiration for any life, however long or brief. To live richly, not in possessions or achievements, but in awareness, appreciation, and authentic connection to others. To recognize, as a young lieutenant did amid the horrors of war, that the ordinary moments we so often overlook contain extraordinary magic. To understand that what endures beyond us is not primarily what we accomplish, but who we love and how well. The battlefield at Belleau Wood has long since been reclaimed by nature. Trees have grown over shell craters. Wildflowers carpet ground once soaked with blood. Visitors today often remark on the site's tranquil beauty, how difficult it is to imagine the terrible struggle that occurred there. Yet beneath that peaceful surface lies the legacy of thousands of young men, like Lieutenant Charles Morgan, who fought not for glory, but for each other, for home, for a future they would never see. In honoring their memory, perhaps the most fitting tribute is not merely to mourn what was lost, but to cherish what remains. The connections that sustain us, the beauty that surrounds us, the ordinary moments whose value becomes clear only when we truly pay attention. For in doing so, we embrace the wisdom Lieutenant Morgan expressed in his final hours, that a life's worth is measured not in its length but in its depth, not in grand accomplishments but in the quality of its bonds. As Charlie wrote to Walter from Belleau Wood, "I've been luckier than most." In the face of our own mortality, there is perhaps no greater aspiration than to be able to say the same, to recognize the privilege of connection, the gift of friendship, the miracle of ordinary days. This may be the most profound legacy of those who, like Lieutenant Charles Morgan, were taken too soon yet somehow continue to speak to us across the years.